Depression had the potential to absolutely ruin my life. I remember sitting at this table that I'm sitting at right now and looking out of the window and thinking, how can I get away from this life? I'm so frustrated with how things have turned out for me, despite all of my best intentions. I don't want to be in this life anymore. And that could have been the end of my story,
Welcome to Amplify with Jess Ekstrom. If you're ready to amplify your ideas, your influence, and your income, then you're in the right place. Do you ever feel like you're supposed to have it all together? As a mom, as a professional, as a human, and deep down, you know it's just total BS, but you still carry the pressure anyway. Today's guest is Sarah Hoover, bestselling author of The Motherhood, a raw, honest, and at times rage-filled exploration of postpartum depression, identity loss, and the invisible weight so many women carry, especially after having a child. You might have seen Sarah on the Today Show, Morning Joe, or Vogue, but her story didn't start in front of cameras. It started in silence during what she describes as the darkest year of her life. In this episode, we talk about what happens when motherhood doesn't feel magical, why having it all is a myth that's crushing so many women, how her identity was shattered and reshaped, and why telling the truth out loud is sometimes the most radical thing we can do. So let's start at the beginning, when Sarah's son was placed on her chest for the first time, and instead of joy, she felt nothing.
I felt nothing. I just felt totally dead inside, and I had been really looking forward to that moment of meeting the baby because I thought it would be this ecstatic explosion of maternal instincts and love for him. And I remember just feeling none of that and being like, I don't want anything bad to happen to him. Of course, he's a tiny baby, but I'm not madly in love with him. I'm not even curious. I don't feel any joy right now. And the thought of having to take care of his every need felt incredibly oppressive. And I remember just being I just want to go back to my life before this. I want to go back to work. I want my body to feel normal. I want to feel capable and strong and I could fall back into the life that I had spent, 15 years building for myself. And the realization that I couldn't go back and that I was stuck in this new reality was heartbreaking to me. I had a massive identity crisis. It felt like a huge rupture. And it just caused this really prolonged and really deep depression that I didn't have the words to explain at the time. And a lot of it manifested in rage. And I just remember being so mad at my doctor and my husband and my mom and the whole world that didn't seem to accept this narrative that motherhood wasn't fun for me and that I didn't feel connected to it or to my child. When I finally got my shit together a year later and started coming out of it through an immense amount of therapy and meds and journaling and a million things, I didn't know that I would ever write about it, I didn't know that that story would become a reason for being. It took a few more years before I decided to turn the experience into a book. But it was a very hard journey. It impacted my marriage. It impacted how I did my job, how I related to my friends. The ripple effect of that depression was massive and really life-changing. So,
And clearly it is striking a chord with so many women. I mean, you have been everywhere. I feel like every time I turn my TV on, you're on it.
good. Then all the hard work is working, I guess.
Yes, and I know that is not on accident. I know what it takes to launch a book and get in front of people from Morning Joe, Today Show, Vogue, Wall Street Journal. You just told me right before this, what's the festival that you're going to? The
LA Times Book Festival, which is at the end of April. I mean, it's been such a heavy lift, but the thing is, it's not for my own glory. I mean, honestly, I don't really like the public facing stuff, but this feels so urgent to me.
Mm-hmm.
Depression had the potential to absolutely ruin my life. I remember sitting at this table that I'm sitting at right now and looking out of the window and thinking, how can I get away from this life? I'm so frustrated with how things have turned out for me despite all of my best intentions. I don't want to be in this life anymore.
Mhm.
And like that could have been the end of my story, you know? And to think that had I just had one friend, one maternal figure, one book that I had read that like spoke to me at all and made me understand that this was like that those feelings were a symptom of like an actual disease that was treatable, I lost a year of my life, right?
Mhm.
So I like feel very urgently and this cause feels like incredibly important to me. I want women to feel seen. And I've been on this book tour now for about a month or 6 weeks. And like en masse, I'm meeting women who have felt destroyed by how their birth stories, their pregnancy stories, their stories of loss, their stories of not connecting to motherhood or not connecting to parts of motherhood, how they felt incredibly unseen and underappreciated for the work that they've done and the sacrifices that they've made, and how they're all just really upset about it. They're rage filled,
Mhm.
they're sad, and they don't feel seen by our society. And like, I think we should all be rioting in the streets, right? So all of that press and all of that work that I've put into getting my book to be visible is because like I don't want anyone to feel the way I felt in that year. I want them to know there's light at the end of the tunnel and that there's a way out and that those feelings, like I always say, postpartum depression is a rational response to a really insane thing that happens to you. And I like want women to feel seen that way, you know? So I've been putting so much effort into getting the book out into the world, and I'm glad to hear that it's working because I feel a little bit in a vacuum. I don't totally know, you know. The people that I interact with self-select, like they've all chosen to come to a public speaking events or whatever. So I'm not sure how out in the world how visible the book has been. So it's good to hear that it's working.
Yeah, and it is definitely working, and I think that I felt that rage too of like, "Why did no one tell me?" And maybe they did, and I just wasn't ready to listen because in my mind, you had the like, preconceived notion that motherhood will be this magical experience.
Right.
And I had the same thing where they laid Ellie on my chest, who is now 2 and my ride or die, and I was like, "Where's the moment?" You know, where's the overwhelming feeling of, like, my life being better? I knew that my life was changed, but I thought it was gonna inherently make my life better, and I felt the opposite. And I wanna talk about that with the tug of war between motherhood and your professional identity, because you have had not only a career as an author, but a career in the arts industry and so many things. And, I felt like the things that I based my identity on before I had kids was, like, my work, my success at work, my body, my productivity, my relationships, my ability to, like, be spontaneous and travel, and so all of a sudden, like, the foundation of how I based how well I was doing, motherhood threatened every single one of those things. And so all the ways that I felt like I made myself whole, I was now having to rebuild. What was the identity shift for you that happened in postpartum, but then also now through writing your book and like what you're doing today?
Yeah, I had always really my career had been really important to me. And I worked in an art gallery for a long time in the same gallery since I was in graduate school. And it was like the most massive part of my identity. I worked all day long, all night long. I traveled a ton. Of course, I like couldn't go right back to that. And I remember, and I write about this in my book, like my husband going back to work soon after we came home from the hospital and me being like so jealous because I wanted to
Mhm.
go back to work, you know, and I couldn't go back right away. But then I eventually did. I mean, the reality is like to have it all, whatever that means for you, you need a lot of money. Like you have to be able, if you don't have family close by, you have to be able to like pay a lot of people to help you have it all. And, uh,
100%.
and like, we have to talk about that because that's the reality. And it's not going to get any better for women with this government making decisions about women's bodies and women's health the way they are. So,
Mhm.
the reality is to have it all, you have to have a lot of money if you don't have, like, a lot of family and that kind of support close by. I was, like, starting off-ish in my career, you know, I was 30, I was working really, really hard. Like, luckily, my husband was we had devoted a we had decided before the baby came that we were going to devote resources to having help at home so that I could go back to work as soon as I could. And in New York City, like we live in a place where that's really common. Like, I grew up in Indiana, and I think most kids like went to daycare and stuff like that, but there wasn't like a real nanny culture where I grew up. We had like talked about it and made a decision. This is in my book about the kind of help that we were going to have at home because my husband knew it was really important to my sense of self to be able to like go back to work. But there is this time, like I just had a second too. I'm a couple months ahead of you. I was 10-month-old, and I had a much happier birth this time and a much different newborn experience. And I feel much more like attached and connected to my baby. Like I'm obsessed with her. And it's a different set of issues now because though I like have plenty of help and I'm really fortunate in that, I I also like don't want to leave her this time.
Mhm.
Like before I was running out the door. I wanted nothing to do with that baby. This time I feel so strongly that I'm doing something I'm so passionate about and that I love so much, and it's absolutely incompatible with mothering to have that kind of passion outside of your home. And like I see, like legislators who bring their newborns to the floor and are nursing while they're like signing bills. And I'm like, yeah, that's badass and it's rad, but like, God, it should not have to be that
It
way. Like
shouldn't have to be that way. Yeah.
you as are a human being, like you deserve to have both. You deserve to have your own identity and also to be a mother. And it's just there is no winning. It's just so hard. And so like with that in mind, with the fact that there is no winning in mind, I'm like, well, men and people who don't have children have to be more empathetic to our stories. Like they have to understand more what that pull is like. They were all babies once too. They got here because a mother sacrificed something to make sure that they could grow up to be thriving individuals, right? And we deserve like respect and acknowledgement for that work and that sacrifice. And I don't think it's possible, especially for men, to have empathy for working women, for women in general, because they never read our stories. Like, that's another reason I wrote this book. Like, when I was in high school, I can tell you the very few women's stories I read, but I mostly read like the Iliad, you know? And that's like another reason that I felt so compelled to write this book. I was like, I want there to be stories out there that men literally can't ignore, that spell out for them what it's like to be a woman grappling with identity and in motherhood, because they have to know so that they can make better decisions on our behalves when they're in the position to do so, right? It's almost not their fault. They're having if you and I couldn't find stories about what it's like postpartum, then how could any dude?
Do that. Yeah, and it actually reminds me of something that your mother told me, who is how we originally got connected, who Martha, your mother, will also be on this show. She said that she knew that you and your sister would be feminists, but it was more important for your brother and your dad to be feminists because raising men who are feminists, who know what women are going through, or at least can have the empathy for it, is the uphill battle, is the challenge.
You're fighting
So
for every step of the way, you know?
every step of the way,
Mhm.
what in your, like, opinion, and uh, I'm, like, thinking about this for myself too, what can we do? How can men or workplaces, uh, what can we do to help them see this
Get it?
and see. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, my answer to everything, which, like, because you've read my book, is truth. Like, you just have to tell your truth. Men have to be confronted with endless versions of women's truths. Like, women have been so conditioned culturally to be polite and quiet. Like, we don't tell our stories enough. We're not loud enough about them. And half the time they're like filled with shame, you know? And I think if we were all like really loud all the time, men would not be able to ignore what these truths are like fairly universal. I've now met hundreds and hundreds of women whose stories were not
Oh,
identical to
tons.
mine, of course, because we are all unique people, but like the feelings that thought I was so alone in that year and even after, it turns out that like thousands of people feel the exact same way as I do, you know? And I only started realizing that once I was like, this is really embarrassing, but I'm just going to start saying this stuff out loud and like see if anyone else agrees. Maybe I'll make one friend. And like I've now met hundreds and hundreds of people consider colleagues on this journey. So like, I just think not being afraid, not being ashamed to say your truth, it's the greatest connector. And it's
And one of
the ammunition against like a male hegemony.
the other things that I really loved that you acknowledged, and that's something that I care deeply about, is like I can come from privilege and but also have this struggle, and I can recognize that too, because as you say in your book, postpartum doesn't discriminate. It's all across the board. But I love that you also recognize that if you want to have it all, you have to pay for it. People have been asking me like, how are you doing it right now? Two under two, you're still like speaking and doing all these things. It's like I have help. I
I know.
have
I mean,
family that lives close by. I pay for more
right.
help, and yet this is still the hardest thing that I've ever done.
I mean, that was kind of my point, right? Like, I didn't want to hide my own circumstances because
Mhm.
A, I like believe in truth, as I've just said. But also, my point is that, like, if it's hard for someone like me, then it's got to be equally, or if not way more hard for everybody else. And like, I know how devastating the experience was for me. I literally wanted to die for a year. I thought about ending my own life. So, like, and yet I had everything, you know?
Mhm.
And of course, I'm like so glad that I had everything and I feel so lucky. I don't think it's like a good thing that to be able to do it all, you have to be able to pay for it. Those aren't circumstances I'm like okay with. I wish the world were different.
Totally.
I don't advocate for it to stay this way, but that is just the reality of what
The
is
reality.
right now. Like, there isn't, I don't know about where you live, but like, I think that the state should subsidize like pre-K
Mhm.
universally. Is that and daycare and like there so many actionable things that I think like our government could do to make the world better for women and children, of course. But I wanted to write a story where people could say, and also like, by the way, there were people who told me to make my book fiction.
Mm.
Like people maybe wouldn't want to hear a story from someone who like has much resources as I have, which I understand. But I was like, I didn't want to do that because I didn't want anyone to read my story and ever be able to say like, oh, she hyperbolized this, she exaggerated, or she made this up. Like, I want people to know that, yeah, I have so much stuff that I'm really lucky to have that no part of me like deserves more than anybody else. And yet, this transition to motherhood was devastating and difficult, and it sets women up for failure to have the expectation be that it's Disney and magic because it wasn't for me.
Where does your how do you feel like where your identity has landed today? Of course, it's ever evolving, but you are now a hugely successful author.
Well, I feel
And
like a
you're also
failure all day,
yeah.
every day. I've never I don't feel successful, and, like, I don't know what the metric is that would make me feel successful, I don't know,
Mhm.
but I feel like I'm always dropping all the balls,
Mhm.
and that's, like, been heavy. I kind of think that before my book came out, I was like, "Once my book is out, I'm gonna have some like time to really step back and take a look at all this and spend, a bunch of hours every day with my baby." And like that hasn't been my reality. And I still don't feel it's my imposter syndrome. Maybe this is like the burden of being a woman too. I don't know that I'll ever feel really successful. I don't know even what that means. Like
Yeah.
for me, the best success is to feel respected by other women who I admire,
Mhm.
creatives and intellectuals who I admire, because there is no, like, metric. There's no bestseller list or whatever that is gonna make me feel, like, really good about myself. My identity right now is, like, promoting this book whose message I fundamentally really believe in, and I want it to be, like, my life's work for right now, and being a mom to these 2 kids and trying to do everything I can to make a world for them that I think they deserve to live in. Like, I'm trying to create a world where people are good and kind and, like, treat each other the way they wanna be treated and are committed to things that fill them with passion, and I'm trying to, like, create that bubble for them,
Yeah.
but my, like, identity, I feel like it changes every day. I don't know
Yeah.
what I don't know if I'll write another book. I don't know if I'll ever have, like, creative time or space. I mean, I started this during COVID. It gave me a lot of creative time and space, you know? I don't know if I'll be able to do that again. I'm loving meeting tons of women, so hopefully I can do, something where I am public facing and get to continue to meet people. I find that really inspiring and keep talking about these topics, but, like, also, I don't wanna be defined by the 1 year I had postpartum depression for forever, so I want
Mhm.
that to evolve too, and, like, another thing that does feel like part of privilege is getting to change your identity and who you are over and over and get to evolve. Like, I don't think that everybody has the creative energy and the time to do that in their lives, you know? So that also feels really lucky. And again, something I wouldn't be able to do if I didn't have an immense amount of help taking care of my kids. Also for my partner, you know, like I have a really supportive partner who works 2 blocks from our house and is like, can do anything for me during the day if I needed to, him to. It's also complex. I mean, I don't know what it looks like to be, like, a really successful woman who's just, like, content and happy in her life. I feel like I feel so much pressure to always do more.
That's literally the thing that I am writing my next book on is, like, what
Really?
does that look like? The, like, working title I have is, like, "Making it without losing it." It's like, how can we have ambition and, like, fulfillment at the same time? And what does that look like for all of us? Because Shonda Rhimes, she did this graduation talk that was, she said it was like, switching these levers of every time I'm succeeding at work, I feel like I'm falling short at home. Every time
Right.
I feel like I'm present at home, I'm falling short at work. And but I think that there's also something to be said because I feel that all the time. I hate getting on the plane and I hate that my daughter now sees a suitcase and knows that it means something. But I also love like this morning I wasn't on, like, Today Show, but I was on the local news for this, like, women's history thing I'm doing, and I saw my daughter see the TV screen and say, like, "That's mama."
Amazing.
And it was like, "Oh, I made this decision even before she was born, and I made it with my husband that I want my daughter and my kids to see me trying. I don't need them to see me succeeding. I need them to see me trying."
Well, I write about this in my book. The truth is, like, as a woman, you deserve to have your own identity that
Yes.
being a mom. And as a kid, like, I saw that in my mom. What she didn't explain it right. Which she's read my book, obviously, and we talk about
Yeah.
this a lot. Like, my mom didn't have the tools to communicate to me, like, "Mommy's leaving the house to go to work for so many reasons, and none of them are because I don't love you," right? So,
Mhm.
when I saw her with her own ambitions and her own identity and her own stuff going on, and I saw her leaving the house, I interpreted that as an ambivalence towards motherhood and as me as her child being a burden and something that got in the way of her being really fulfilled. That, like, messed me up. But I think with, like, the right communication to your kids, it benefits them to know that you as a woman are worth and deserve developing your own identity outside of them, and that they will be worth and will deserve that too in their own lives, right?
Yeah. And it's almost I had an opposite experience where my mom was all in
Mhm.
on my and I loved that, but I also felt like that was my playbook, and I've talked to her about this. My playbook was once I become a mom, that is me, and that's it. And she was the substitute teacher at my school, the PTA president, the, like, doing everything, which I, again, loved. But I felt such conflicting, things because I was like, when I became a mom, I was like, "I don't feel like I wanna do that."
Yeah.
I
And I
feel
think
like I
there are some
feel
women
here.
for whom that's totally natural, right? There are some
Yeah.
who that is their joy and that's their most fulfilled. That was never gonna fulfill me. That wasn't
Yeah.
my passion in life. That's not what I'm, like, born to do. And I don't think women should feel badly because they also want an identity outside of that. I don't think that
Yeah.
makes you a bad mom or bad at being a girl. I think that just makes you different. There are totally
Totally.
women for whom having babies and being a mother is their absolute destiny, and they're incredible at it. I'm jealous of those women. I wished I had felt like that when my son was born, but just my reality is that I don't. and that it doesn't make me feel good about myself. And I think just as a human, I deserve to do the things that make me feel good about myself. I don't want to like feel like I'm punished for that because it makes me a bad mom under someone else's definition, right?
I want to end with one of the quotes from your book. I'm going to even put it up here that I just loved so much. Once you own your story, your shame, your insecurities, you won't have a problem naming them. And that takes away the power of anyone who wants to use them against you.
Amen.
Total mic drop. I love it.
Thank you.
Everyone go buy The Motherload anywhere books are sold. Sarah, anything else you want to leave with our audience today?
I will say I narrated that book myself. So if you're an audiobook person and you don't hate the sound of my voice, I tried really hard on that and it was really fun. So you can totally do the audiobook and get a whole experience there.
Did you have like I felt like narrating my audiobook was like a religious experience for me. Was that
I like
for you?
cried during it.
Same.
Yeah, I was so emotional. It was very special for me. I feel really lucky I got to do it. So
I felt the same way. So yeah, grab the audiobook. Sarah Hoover, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone.
thank you.
Yes.
So yes, thanks everybody.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Amplify. If you're a fan of the show us some podcast love by giving us a rating and review. This episode is brought to you by Mic Drop Workshop, where you can learn how to become a better speaker, how to land paid speaking gigs, and become a keynote speaker. This episode was edited and produced by Walk West. I'm Jess Ekstrom, reminding you that you deserve the biggest stage, so let's find out how to get you there. I'll see you again soon.